Welcome to Mini Fights. I'm Brian, and we are painting Warhammer Underworlds. Skaeth's Wild Hunt. I don't know how to say that. Well, these models are sweet, and we've gotten to a point now. We are in episode 2 of this series, so if you are looking to see the beginning and all the steps we've already applied here, go ahead and check that video out in the top right. So in this episode we're going to work on some hair, and this is some 80s hair metal hair. It's awesome. So we're going to apply coal black to the hair, and on most of the models I actually did not apply it everywhere. Instead of applying it to all the hair and then building up areas of it later, I just kind of put it where the shade would be and left the rest alone. I think the intent was to kind of let the primer come through a little bit, show me where I wanted the light to hit. I would say that this hair, the way it ends up being lit, is really kind of a blend of the way the light would hit it, but also that it is specifically sort of been dyed in a gradient because that is the most hair metal wood elf centaur way of doing things. And our second layer is going to be a mix of the original coal black, a little bit of a fluorescent green to add a lot of color intensity, and a little bit of my favorite highlight color, Vallejo model color ice yellow. As we apply that, we're going to just blend the transitions with a little bit of thinned out coal black, kind of like on the flesh tones. We're taking sort of layer A and layer B, and we're putting a layer between them by glazing over both of them. And the final step of this process on the hair that really is going to tie the hair together nicely is just building in more ice yellow into that mix. So you can see me putting the fluorescent green in there. We're going to throw some ice yellow in there as well. We're going to get a nice lighter tone, and we're sort of not only building a lighter value, but we're also doing kind of a color shift as we move through these layers here. We're going to apply this to the tips of the hair, and this is going to really end up giving it that nice kind of like hair metal pop, that blend, and it also makes the individual strands kind of stand out. Now we get back to the kind of less exciting lower body. It's coming together all right, though. I like it. It's just not as exciting as that cool hair. We're just going to go ahead and put a little light back into the legs, and that's going to be applied with Mornfang and a little bit of P3 Menoth White Base, kind of a bone color. Ultimately, the longer hair areas that we painted separately and the primary fur color, are pretty close together, and we probably could have painted them in one shot together, but this was, again, I winged this paint scheme pretty much on the go, so some of this is just it coming together in separate stages when it could have been done more efficiently had I planned it. Pretty much the story of my life. This particular model, obviously the most amount of rendering to do, most surface area. I tried to use kind of flicks of the brush and the side of the brush to kind of imply hatching while we put the various layers on there. That's going to give us a little bit of like a fur texture without us having to like sit there and meticulously hand render little individual lines over the entirety of its flanks and all that. You can see as I highlight, I'm actually kind of highlighting in a hatch along the long areas. So the brush, instead of running parallel, it's running perpendicular a lot of times to the highlight surface. Our friend the cat dog is pretty much just identical, you know, ultimately in the style of painting that you have to do on the real centaur guy who actually has he's a centaur. But same kind of rendering, same flicky kind of edging. I will say too that at this step, if you're really looking at that paint closely, you're going to see there's a lot of sheen in it, and that's because the Mournfang is pretty shiny, and then we hit it with that Army Painter, which is also shiny. It probably would have behooved me to apply a matte varnish to the models between those steps. It can be harder to render highlights when there's a glossy surface because the light will trick you and you're not necessarily sure where you've already applied highlights and where you need to apply highlights. Working with paints that have a shiny sheen when you're building layers can be difficult, and sometimes it's worth your time to just spray them with some matte, wait out the drying time, and come back to them. Nothing really to be said here. I am applying black. It's black mixed with a little coal black, so it's just a hair towards kind of a bluish black. We are just applying it to all the trim areas. One thing to remember when you are painting black like this, you can thin it quite a bit. You can see it sort of flowing off my brush really nicely. You're going to learn that the more you paint this way, you'll find that you can really kind of lay the brush sideways on a lot of areas, and the paint will flow nicely right onto the detail you need. As your brush control gets better, you will find that you'll be able to base coat things like this with more confidence and more speed. So after some deliberation, I decided on a really intense orange. I think it really beautifully sets off the greenish blue, that kind of aquatic looking color we've picked for the hair. And I think it ties nicely to the fur color we've chosen as well. So really happy with this choice. We're getting there as far as we're just base coating it in. This particular paint, the pigmentation in it is a little light, so you can thin it, but as you thin it, you start to lose some of its structure, and you usually have to apply 2 coats, even over white primer. Not a big deal, just remember 2 thin coats, not 1 thick one. It's very easy to accidentally apply the paint a little too thick and get some texture, which we are definitely wanting to avoid. So often I will create a shade by picking a shade color that is complementary to the base color. So coal black is pretty much a complement to orange as far as the color wheel is concerned. Complementary colors are opposing each other on the color wheel, and they tend to create a lot of visual interest when applied next to each other. However, when you mix them together, you push the color to the middle of the color wheel, which is the boring neutral desaturated zone, but that is often very effective for shading. So I mixed coal black with the original orange, the Troll Slayer orange, and I'm just applying it where the shadows would make sense. And even though my underpainting is gone, I'm still kind of recalling where the light and shadow was and recreating that as I apply the shade. As I continue winging this process, instead of building the shade further down, I'm now going to go ahead and build some light in. This is going to be Troll Slayer orange with a little ice yellow and a little bit of sun yellow. And we're going to put this back where the light would be. The application of this layer is pretty rough, and you can see me sort of sketching it in, and that's fine. It's really easy to take these yellows and oranges and thin them a little bit and then blend transition layers. So I'm not too concerned. I don't get too wound up about it being sort of a blotchy yellow in the middle of the orange field. It's very easy to blend it in. But if you get too subtle, sometimes your layers will not come through. They're too small. They're not big enough jumps in value. So I try to do big jumps in value first, worry about the blending after the fact. So this is a challenging step. It's pretty fun, but challenging. We're building coal black and actual regular black paint, mixing those together and creating a shade that we're going to apply very thinly to all the recesses. So this is a fairly thin paint. We want it to flow nice. You can see it coming off my brush nice and smooth. And we're basically painting in the hatch marks of this armor. The armor is sort of like got a wicker style weave to it, which is really cool. It kind of evokes like a lacquered samurai kind of armor or something like that. Putting these lines back in can be a little challenging. As you put them back in, you can see some of mine are wider or thinner than others. It's easy to fix them. We go back and take our yellow that we had mixed up before, the last color we used to build light, and we just fix up those hatches, fix up those lines that got a little astray of where we wanted them to. On this particular armor plate, I am rebuilding some of the light to make sure that it hits where I want it and it comes up to the value level that I want. I'm going in and applying shades to the horns. We're going to build up the layering on the horns as well, the same way we build it up on the armor. Luckily, the horns don't have the crosshatch pattern. Next step is we are going to work in that same coal black and black mixture, and we're going to glaze it into the darkest areas. And you can see it builds up much more cool tone shadows, and it's also significantly darker on the value scale. This last step is really what ties everything together. It's the most technically difficult part and also the most rewarding, and this is the final light step, the final edge highlight along the various wicker cross-hatched areas. They instantly jump out at you as you apply this really nice high value line next to the dark line of the shade. It's critical to get those lines next to each other and have it make sense. So take your time here. The result can be very stunning, especially on the raised areas of the round pieces of armor like the shoulder pads. The last two steps we're going to do here in this video are this highlight that we talked about, and you can see how effective it looks as we apply it to the hatching, and then just a general little bit of a cleanup of the black areas and going back over the heraldry on the shield and a few other things. And I'd like to thank everybody for watching this one. We're going to have a couple more videos here as we move forward, as I get through all the steps on these models. Really happy with the way they're coming out so far. You know, for winging it, I'm absolutely stunned that the colors have come together this well. It can be really fun to just sort of find stuff as you go this way. As we finish this step by cleaning up some of the black that sat on top of our rendered areas as carefully as we can, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. We're going to move on to video 3 here shortly. If you like this one, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.